So I don't want to start something that is mundane, that doesn't require thinking. I want to prompt a response that requires you to think. And if your beliefs are challenged, right, in that moment, right, you're not able to just stay on one line of thought. So from a philosophical standpoint, right, creating these philosophy meetings, even with family, I think is key. And asking about, challenging ideas about what we see in the world or the system or within ourselves, things that make us think about the core of our own values. And what this does as well is allows people to be more authentic, right? Authenticity, as it's been shown scientifically, is the highest frequency. But what is authenticity? Authenticity is when your values match your actions. So the reason why truth speakers have such a high magnetic presence is because you're speaking from an authentic place. The world likes the energy of authenticity, but only when it comes in certain categories, right? So you're authentic, and as you can be authentic in your music sometimes, as far as the way you show up in character, but they don't really want you to speak truth and really want to know what's on your mind. And I think that we're going to be stripping away a lot of those niceties, right? And respectability politics, you feel me? And getting to more authenticity. And the deeper you can get the authenticity in your brand and yourself and right your life, you have a higher magnetic energy around you that resonates, that allow you to create quantum leaps. I know some of the richest people in the world, the most influential people in the world, and I advise some of those people. And really it's the authentic presence in which I speak and command, right? And what I didn't realize at first is this was an unconscious mastery. So going through that exercise of like writing down, what is it that I do? What is the thing that people are attracted to? And once you figure that out, you're able to get other people repeatable results, right? And if you can live an authentic life, you live a full life, right? So what happens with a lot of people is they live a life to where they're selling their values, right, for money. And it's things that go against their values. And so they don't feel fulfilled because they're not connected and it's not authentic to self. They're selling products, advertisement, sponsor slots, right? Going to spaces, wearing things that's not authentic. And we as a culture are not being authentic to ourselves. And I think that that's a word that should be carried more in our spaces of conversation, is authenticity. So when we're trying to figure out what is our culture, we have to be authentic and we have to be truthful with ourselves. And then that's when our culture becomes, resonating at a higher frequency and more attractive to us. So right now, hip hop is not as attractive as it once was because it's not authentic. We know the rapper's not saying what they truly mean, right? And desire can be sold as well, where we're selling people on lower desire. But remember, the highest frequency, which will be highest self, if we're looking at it from that scale, then we'll be looking at it, okay, when you at the most authentic, like, let's look at J. Cole. J. Cole is considered one of the best rappers, right? But what is the attraction piece that keeps him at the top? Is that J. Cole seems to be someone who is in a constant search for being authentic, right? From where he wears, how he dresses. His music is a search for authenticity within himself. And it's a projection of when he finds that authenticity and speaking that and having these raw moments. So that creates polarizing tension that when somebody feels negative about it or positive about it, it evokes emotion, right? Because it challenges your own beliefs about yourself. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. Well, it's not you. It's what he would have done because that's authentic to his value system. But all of this line of thinking comes from my current research that I'm doing right now. And I really just wanted to make sure that, I shared some of this while it's fresh on my mind. You say this how you think about trading options. That's beautiful. I like that. I think that's really dope. I think having a philosophy for everything you're doing, it adds meaning, right? It has meaning to what you're doing. And what I've been focused on as well is like, even with our news channel, making sure that the news is authentic in the sense that it's truthful, right? Like, take some moments and some time to think about what we're putting out, why other people put out certain headlines and create it in a certain way, and what is the overall end goal that justifies our actions, right? That, and how we influence people. Now, I will say this: authenticity requires sacrifice. When I turned down McDonald's, right, as a sponsor, that's because I was being authentic to myself. I really wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't thinking about what I was turning down at all. I wasn't thinking about what the business needed. You know, the business needs capital, of course. Media requires capital, requires funding, requires sponsorship. I was being selfish, thinking about myself, right? Which is an interesting idea within that. And authenticity requires you to be selfish. Because if I was thinking about the business, then I would have said specifically, and depending on what your philosophy is in business, if I want to do it in a manner to where it's like, okay, we need to make the most money, and Keys, do this, even if you're willing to sacrifice this, I could have philosophized my way into turning it into a compromise rather than, sacrificing integrity. But when I make decisions like that, and it's based on integrity and authenticity, integrity being one of the values, and authenticity, it makes me more fulfilled, right? And if I'm not fulfilled, then I can't do the work. So if we take that and we get the money, and we can have more presence, and we can grow. And this is the thing about platforms, is that even when you take money, you have to think long term, because will it rob you of being authentic? Because how can I then take more money from a company when my content, right, is the opposite? But they obviously must look at my data and say, well, so a lot of your consumer base eats McDonald's. So a lot of y'all probably are their customers. So while I'm being authentic, my consumer base could be watching me eating McDonald's at the same time. But the reason they're watching is because they want to make a shift in habits. So they're looking for counter arguments, right, to their current actions so that they can make change. So then that means that, my influence wouldn't be positive, it would be negative, and then it would be neutralized from being radical at all, right, to being influential, because I will become just entertainment instead of impact. And one thing I've been saying is impact is income. Impact is income. So if you look at it like that, that when you think, and here's another thing, it's like there are people who want you to do what they do, and they almost don't respect what you do unless you're doing what they do, and they're flawed. They're flawed in their thinking, because what they're saying is what they're doing is not enough. And human beings, again, are selfish. A lot of the impact that we do, we go in person. We meet people. We do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and we're limited in what we can do. And I thought about this. I say, man, our culture puts so much emphasis on things that other cultures just don't have to think about, which is another form of privilege. I seen Shannon Sharp got $100 million contract. And Shannon Sharp's what he does. He sometimes talk about politics. For the most part, he talks just about sports. Creates moments in sports. And do I have an expectation for him to do what I do, right? Do I have an expectation for him to be a social activist in the street? No. And no other culture had this expectation besides our own, right? That if I'm doing this revolutionary thing, you have to do it as well. Even though it's counter thesis, because the reason I'm doing this is so it eliminates the problem, so nobody has to do this in the first place. So it's people living at different levels, and there's different Americas that's happening all around us. There's some people that are second generation born wealth, not that many of us, smaller generations. There are some people that are middle to upper class, and then there are some people at the lower tiers. of society. And everybody has their place. But I think about how if you are a Caucasian male and you have a podcast, you have a sports show, you have whatever you're doing, there's zero expectation outside of that occupation for them. They're not expected to speak on politics, social realities, engage in any discussions, be revolutionary and radical whatsoever. And of course, there's a reason for that. We have completely different realities in which we live upon. But then there's also who would actually be good at it. Then it's the aspect that, well, when they are challenged, we do see a thread of cohesion of people having the same message, right? Like when Donald Trump was being elected, all these influencers got on this wave of having the same speaking points and challenging the same ideologies. And normally their platforms were just about entertainment, right? But we really seen them get into the political space. But not only that, they were embraced. And this is the bigger thing, because in the black community, we don't want to embrace different voices, but we want them to help us. And this is where I think we fail heavy. We want our cake and eat it too. Right? You want to be able to gatekeep culture, ignore a certain archetype of people, right? And voices and platforms, right? And actually keep them away from growing because they don't fit in your ideology of what's considered to be safe. Yet, you want to be able to criticize them for not being on your side and fighting for you, your rights, your position, and your reality. There's something extremely flawed about that as an expectation. Extremely flawed. And I'll get into that in just a second. And it's partially my thesis that most people don't even understand what they're doing. There's really three Americas, the way I look at it, right? There's, of course, lower, middle, and upper. There's an erasure of the middle. Those who are in the middle are now being thrown down to lower. And then there's a separation, right? And that separation happens, and I think everybody can understand it from a point of view where wage gaps are much higher, right? The wage gap between what a nurse is making and a doctor is making used to be maybe 2 times. Now it's like 10 times, right? What the store manager and what the worker is making, right? It wasn't as big as a gap. It could be like 20 times now, right? With the CEO and the average person is like 100,000 times. You know what I mean? You have a CEO that is getting a $200 million bonus while the worker may be getting a $200, $2,000 bonus, maybe something like that, right? So there's a huge gap then while prices are rising, so affordability challenges. So therefore you get this world where the middle class is going lower and lower and lower, upper class going higher and higher and higher. But those who are in the middle, they have a history that is attached to the middle class mindset. And this is something that's not explored enough. The difference between how those in the middle class think and those at the lower class and those at the higher class think. And I'll get into that in just a second.